I call this meeting of the Davenport Community School District Board of Directors to order. We appreciate your attendance at this board meeting. By attending meetings, you can learn about the accomplishments, needs, and concerns we face. The board meets regularly on the first Monday for committee of the whole meetings and second and fourth Mondays of each month for regular meetings. Open forum for the public is available only at regular meetings. All meetings are open to the public except closed and exempt sessions, which are permitted by certain sections of Iowa Code. All board decisions, however, are made in public open sessions. The board is not a forum, it is a deliberative body. Accordingly, it receives communications, both oral and written, as a medium of information. It does not debate the contents of such communications, but considers them in making decisions and in the establishment of policies. During each regular board meeting, there is an opportunity to address the board by completing an open forum request and giving it to the board secretary prior to the meeting. Each person may have up to 2 minutes of time to speak. This is a time of listening by the school board, so the board does not make any comments during open forum. The issue will usually be referred to the administration for further study and follow-up if necessary. When the board president recognizes you, direct your comments to the entire board and limit your remarks to 2 minutes unless extra time has been approved by the board president prior to the meeting. The school board president will recognize one speaker at a time and will rule out of order other speakers who are not recognized. Only those speakers recognized by the chair will be allowed to speak. Comments by others are out of order. The school board president shall promptly rule out of order any discussion by any person, including school board members, that would violate the provision of state or federal law, our open forum policy, or the statutory rights of privacy of an individual. To ensure that the board can conduct the important business of the district, the following guidelines apply to all members of the public who attend board meetings. The board asks that all members of the public treat open forum speakers, district employees, and the board with respect. Individuals are not permitted to engage in conduct that interferes with the ability of other individuals to watch the board meetings, interferes with the ability of other members of the public to offer comment to the board, or interferes with the ability of the board to conduct its business. Demonstrations during public comments, such as clapping or cheering in response to either public comments or statements made by board members, is discouraged. Those wishing to display placards, signs, and/or banners may not block any attendee's view of the proceedings. Before we move on to the rest of our meeting, I wanted to note that we have 2 of our board members who are participating by phone tonight. We have Director Mayfield and Director Beck, who are on the phone. And would you both just chime in that you're here before we continue?
Yeah.
I'm here. All right, this is Director Beck.
Okay, thank you. And Director Mayfield?
Yeah.
Okay.
I am there listening.
Great, thank you. And you both sound really good, by the way. Thank you for being here. And thank you for taking the time to participate by phone. I know sometimes it's difficult depending on everything else that's going on. We'll continue with our board priorities. Director Hayes, would you please read those for us?
Yes, I'll be happy to. The Davenport School Board establishes the following priorities to ensure the academic success of all students. Provide leadership and direction to improve the overall learning environment in our classrooms, schools, and district, including the health, safety, security, and happiness of students and staff, and to direct and support actions, programs, and activities which reduce the impact of poverty on our students, their families, and our communities.
Thank you. And Director Beck, do you have a copy of the mission and vision statements there that you could read for us?
I do not have one in front of me yet. Sorry, I'm
Oh.
still trying to pull it up.
That's okay, then I'm going to ask somebody else. How about Director DeSalvo?
I'd be happy to.
Okay, thank you.
Our mission statement is to enhance each student's abilities by providing a quality education enriched by our diverse community. And our vision statement, education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you. Today has been a little bit of a strange day for all of us probably with the weather. And there was no school, and it doesn't look like we have any student board members. Do you know, are there any reports to give? No. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to board reports. Are there any? Director DeSalvo.
I would just like to report that we had kind of a, I'll call a pseudo legislative advocacy committee meeting. We met with some of our subcommittee members and had a discussion of planning for what we are preparing for the legislative session that will begin in January. We had a pretty good discussion. We're talking about some plans for how we would like to approach legislators to help us with our funding, trying to get another bill written and passed. We have a lot of work ahead of us, and we realize that. So we're just kind of starting to put some plans in place.
Thank you. Director Gosa.
Last week I got to hang out at Fillmore for the Breakfast with Buddies, and then I stayed the rest of the day and did the Watchdog and got to work with some of the kids and stuff. So I do like getting out and hanging out with the kids in the classroom, especially kindergarten.
Director Hayes.
First of all, the board would like to offer and express our sincere condolence in the passing of Cindy Grip, who was an employee that worked in various positions for over 27 years with the district, and also Albert DeFall, who is the father-in-law of Nikki, which was a previous board member. In the past few weeks, I've gone to Williams several times. Sandy Schmitz and I have held a couple of focus groups, one with 9 community leaders, which included previous educators, a pastor, in AACP leadership, and one of the individuals there was also a nurse. One of the questions asked was, how do we build and regain trust with parents within the district? This topic was discussed in detail on various ways to start from ground zero, rebuilding one school at a time. One of the individuals within the group made an interesting observation. In order to truly understand, one must have the ability to stand under. I thought that was a real catchy thing, and by that, what he says is, in order to stand under, you would have had to understand what issues that are happening for yourself to actually be able to feel and kind of see what's going on with the individuals in the district. We need to acknowledge our students are equal while you have them. Give your absolute best. Our littles need an advocate, and educators need to take the time to invest in them whether or not they want to. It's not the board's intention nor our job to do a clean sweep of our district with our teachers and that do not have a sincere vested interest in our students, but it is my prayers that those that do not, to rethink their positions. Perhaps this job is not for them. The meeting with the 3 separate groups of students was extremely depressing, but it was real. Out of the mouths of babes is pretty much how I categorized it. We did 3 separate groups with 4, 4, and 5 students in each one of the groups. They gave real examples and even called teachers by names that were not really on board with our mission. One student stated that her mother blocked the school's number because she got sick of the school calling on bad things. How do we connect if we can't be heard? These behaviors are really not acceptable. There was one example given that if we're in this room together and we separate half of the room, and we put good teachers on one side and bad teachers on the other side. And almost simultaneously, 5 of them said that bad side would be good. It would be full. There would be some, and they went to naming off different people that would fit on this good side. And it was really painful to sit there and hear that, but it had to be expressed. When they came in, they were playful and like, I'm really not wanting to be here. What do you want? What do you want to know? And once they loosened up, they really shared more than I wanted to hear. And it was a sad situation to actually sit and hear that. When asked the question, when did you notice it? I think it's happened so long that they didn't realize it was an issue. And then Sandy says, so when did you notice that some of your friends are not necessarily treated the way that you're treated? Oh, it got really bad when we went to intermediate school. That's when you really notice it. And the treatment's not fair, and they just going on giving example after example till finally we stopped it and moved on to another question. So it is real, and the principal was there to take notes on that entire situation, and I'm sure that she will go forward with that in addressing these issues. In going to our meeting on with the state on November 14th, it was clear that Davenport had a massive hill to climb. For many, we've just done business as usual. It may be a difficult transition for some, but it can be done as long as everyone is held accountable and committed to making it happen and doing our part. I kind of look at this entire situation as horrible that it had to happen to our district, but to me, it's almost like the matriarch elephant is now in the room and brought her herd with her. It's not optional. We all need to get on board to turn this thing around and make those 6 hours that we spend in this classroom with each other conducive for everyone, both staff and teachers, as we're now under a microscope, and it's only going to get worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other board reports? Director Beck and Director Mayfield, do you have any board reports?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you both. We'll move on with communications. Director Hayes, would you read our communications for us?
I'm just ecstatic to do so.
Okay, thank you.
On November 27th, Tuesday at 7 p.m., the Davenport Community School District Holiday Concert will be held at the Adler Theater in Davenport. December 3rd, Monday at 5:30 p.m., Committee of the Whole meeting here in the Jim Hester Boardroom at 1702 Main Street, Achievement Service Center. December 5th, Wednesday at 4 p.m., a Policy Committee meeting will be held in the Executive Boardroom, 1702 Main Street, Achievement Service Center. December 10th, Monday at 6 p.m., our regular board meeting will be held here in the Jim Hester Boardroom, 1702 Main Street at the Achievement Service Center, and there's only one meeting in December. On December 24th and 25th, both Monday and Tuesday, will be closed for the holidays, and also December 31st and January 1st, Monday and Tuesday, closed for the holiday as well.
Thank you. Next is open forum, and we only have one open forum request tonight. Excuse me? Oh, if you'll bring it over and give it to the board secretary. So we have two. Open forum is a time for members of the community to give input at a board meeting regarding school district issues or concerns. Individuals who want to speak should fill out an open forum request and give it to the board secretary prior to open forum. The board will not act on any issue presented during open forum if it was not published as an agenda item. The Iowa Open Meetings Law prohibits action on any issue that is not on the agenda. The president will set the amount of time allowed for individuals to speak during open forum. The board asks that no charges or complaints be made against individual employees of the district or community during open forum. Remarks that reflect negatively on the character or motives of any person will be called out of order. As I mentioned, we have two open forum requests. And since we have two, we'll go ahead and allow 3 minutes for each of you. First is Pat, I'm going to say Robinson. If you would come up, Pat, to the microphone, give us your name and address, and then after that will be Katerina Bolton. So go ahead, Pat.
To push this to get it on? Now we are? Okay.
It's good.
My name is Pat Robinson. I live at 2123 Newcastle Court in Davenport. I'm a former principal in the Davenport Community School District. I'm here tonight because we're going to be listening to the Hazard Young Atia report, and I'm sure we've all read what they're going to talk to us about tonight. I found no surprises in it when I read it. I read about the declining enrollment, but I've been hearing about that for several decades, dealing with it. And I thought the report was really a good profile of our district and what is. So what prompted me to come tonight is that I'd like to suggest that this is a time, a critical time, for asking a question, what next? We've been dealing with this declining enrollment now for some time. It's painful to struggle with the cutting back and the closing of schools, and we could continue that. Or would we rather go to a proactive stance and put forth, with our unique assets, a new design for students to excel? The Davenport Community School District could be the leader in education in the Quad Cities. So the question to answer is, do we want to continue struggling with cutting and closing, or would we rather advance and attract others to join us? Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Next is Katerina.
Katerina Bolton, 1920 Walling Court here in Davenport. Sorry, I'm a little hoarse. I'm coming to talk about several things. One of the topics is the Des Moines meeting with the Department of Education on the 14th of November when they were discussing whether or not to have a phase 2. And so I just wanted to come and talk about that because it appears that board members are false narrative, if you will, that parents brought on the phase 2, which obviously we did not. The state was already involved before parents had anything to do or say about it, because a group of parents and I went to Des Moines and spoke as far as our issues. And it was really eye-opening to hear a board acknowledge the pain that our kids have gone through, on behalf of the district and educators and administrators. And that's something, unfortunately, that we have never have had happen here. It's always been the opposite. Telling us we overreact, that we need to be polite, work with the system, what have you. So talking about starting from ground zero, one of the things that has not happened is the acknowledgement of what is actually going on and what has happened. And as the state said when they were here a few weeks ago, is that that you do need to be talking to community members, do need to be talking to parents, and not brushing off those comments, which sounds like there's different focus groups going on or what have you. But these issues that are going on didn't just happen starting April. You know, it's been decades. It's generational issues. My family, my brother, we are Hispanic. My brother is a lot darker complected than I am. He's been chased down. We've always been in Davenport schools, but he's been chased down. KKK written on his computer. He's been stabbed. He's been called the N-word. Going back to my father, who's over 60 years old, like, it's generational. So it's going to be a lot of work, and we're just not seeing that effort put forward. There's a lot of tight lips and politics here, but these are our children's lives, not just mine, not just friends of mine, but the entire community. As you can see, when you have a focus group and only one person comes, again, these are generational issues. It's not something that's going to be easily solved just by the focus groups that you have. You actually have to pull your sleeves up and get in and do the work, and that's what's not happening. Is the work is not, you're not in there doing the work. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Katerina, and thank you both, Pat and Katerina, for sharing your perspectives and your thoughts with the board and with the community. It's always important for us to have that information. We'll move on to the consent agenda. May I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Director DeSalvo.
I move that the board approve the consent agenda as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? What's that?
Second.
Oh, okay. Thank you, I had that. Is there any discussion? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Director DeSalvo,
Yes.
Director Potts,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Mayfield,
Yes.
and Director Beck.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding payment of bills?
Mr. President,
Director DeSalvo.
I move that the board approve the following resolution as recommended by administration for adoption of the bills from bill listing periods of November 8th, 2018 through November 21st, 2018. Resolved, all claims presented to the board having been duly certified as correct by the secretary, reviewed by the administration and board members, and they are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn on the treasury for the several amounts. Further resolved, the payment of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the periods of November 8th, 2018 through November 21st, 2018.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote. Director DeSalvo,
Yes.
Director Hayes, Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Potts,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Mayfield,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Superintendent report.
There's none at this time.
All right, we'll move on to other items requiring action. May I have a motion regarding approval of early retirement incentive?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move the board approve the early retirement incentive for the one-time reduction of years of service eligibility requirement to 15 years for the 2018-19 school year only.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director DeSalvo.
In a meeting that the board reviewed some of this proposal earlier, in about an hour meeting, we took a lot of time considering this option. It's not one that I feel we all feel great about, but unfortunately, we are at a time in our budget where we have to take some very serious action. this is one of those items, knowing that we have the potential of losing staff that are tenured and experienced. But I do believe this is something that we should support in the hope that some people will take advantage of this opportunity, that we will continue to grow and build staff that come in to replace those experienced folks, and that this will help our general fund budget.
Thank you. Anybody else? Director Mayfield, Director Beck, do you have anything to add?
This is Director Beck. I would like to second what Director DeSalvo said. Having reviewed this, I have concerns that we're going to be losing some more really good teachers. But again, it's something that I think has to be done right now.
Thank you. Director Mayfield, do you have anything?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Basically, I agree about the early retirement. Of course, what would be of concern with me is the experience that we're losing with it. It takes many years to accumulate the knowledge and the experience that those teachers had. So we're having trouble being successful with the experience. You can imagine what it's going to be like with inexperience. But we really have to work hard to level the playing field. So as you know, it hasn't been very level lately. And quite frankly, we do with good intent, but that does not mean we're successful in what we're doing. As you know, I've been around long enough to see many attempts, and each time we've claimed success, at least for a year or 2 years. The scores are getting better, everything's getting better, but 10 years later, we're sitting either the same place or beyond where we started out at. So we just need to keep our minds focused on this. If we're going to redo, or should I say, extend the experience of those older teachers, we have to make sure that we're getting that information and sticking to programs that work. And that's for a later discussion. I've seen many successful programs go by the wayside, and we're still where we were at. So if we want people to come to this district, I heard the ex-principal, I caught her first name was Pat. I heard her say, we have got to become so attractive, so different, which I think we have in many areas, that people will want to come here. We have to stop the flow of students leaving. And we can close school after school after school until there are no schools in Davenport school system. And all we're doing is dismantling. We are not building anything yet. And that's what I'm waiting to see when we are building and successfully. And look at the programs, and we have some extraordinary programs that we've been successful with. But for whatever reason, we're not reaching all students as our mission says that we are trying to do. So I just wanted to leave it at that for right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote. Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director DeSalvo,
Yes.
Director Potts,
Yes.
Director Mayfield,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval for the December 2018 SBRC hearing?
Mr. President.
Director Hayes.
I move that the board does not request modified supplemental amount of spending authority for the negative unspent balance on June 30th of 18 at the SBRC hearing on December 11, 18. The board will appear at the December 11, 18 hearing and present an update. The board will request to appear at the SBRC hearing in March of 2019, at which time an updated plan will be presented, and the district will make the request for the spending, modified supplemental spending in March.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director DeSalvo.
This is for Claudia. Do you know when we will have the updated plan? Do you know when we'll have a plan from you that you're going to present?
That's something that the interim superintendent, that's something that we'd like to be working on and discussed at the board meetings in December and January, so that we can have updated plan submitted to the Department of Ed at the beginning of February for that March hearing.
Thank you.
Director Hayes.
And Claudia, just for clarification, we are not doing it in December because we do not have the option to redo it in March?
That's correct. We are required to appear at the hearing in December, but if we ask for the modified supplemental amount and they deny that, we cannot request it again.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion?
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
I'd like to clarify that part of the reason for this change from the original plan is that we are being asked to adjust our budget so that we reach a positive balance within 2 years rather than 5, correct?
Claudia, do you want to try and answer that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Director DeSalvo.
We've talked about this a lot, but do we have any idea why it all of a sudden has changed to 2 years and we thought we had 5?
I think that's a fair question. I think it's a difficult question to answer. Trying to think of the best way to answer this, and I think the best way is to see if interim Superintendent Schneckloth would like to take a shot at it before I goof it up.
I think everybody that has been attending the SBRC was under the impression that we had a 5-year term to reduce to get to our goal. And I'm going to talk more about this in the budget portion, but it is, closer. It is the understanding that when you go before the SBRC, that there's 2 timelines, and the first timeline is the 2-year period. Correct me if I'm make a mistake here, Claudia. There's a 2-year period where they expect you to be neutral. They expect you to be 0. And then there's a 5-year plan that shows that you can sustain that. And we were operating off the 5-year plan. And so the feedback that we got at the state board meeting was we need to see a 2-year plan. And so we've been feverishly working with the State Department. And the big question that we're going to discuss later is we go before them in December 11th, and the number that we have to reduce is by the end of 2020, not 2023. And so that's going to cause us to have completely different actions, and that's brand new. Well, it's new operating directions for us. And so the discussion that we're going to have later is is how do we move forward with that? And so I believe that's the discussion we're going to have later.
I think that's correct, and I appreciate you expressing it that way. It's complex, and there have been hours and hours of time put into trying just to resolve that very question. Why now is it 2 years and not 5 years? And when we talk about 2 years, we're talking the end of June 2020. And so there will be much more discussion there. It's related to the MSA, which is part of this motion that we're currently on, but it's incredibly more complex than just that. Does that make sense? Kinda?
Of course it does.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this item? All right, we'll call for the vote. Director Hayes.
Yes.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, Director Mayfield.
I do understand what you're saying about 2 years and different than the 5 years. Again, what has concerned me, we have to look and take the advice of those who's supposed to know and who've been taking the leading role in understanding this. Because it sounds like you didn't understand it any better than I did. Maybe you do. But our administrators have been taking the lead hand at this. Not to say that they're at fault, but what information comes through and how we understand it normally is through them. We can read the same paper, but we need their interpretation. So it sounds like we didn't get the right interpretation or misunderstood what was being said. And if it was just one or two people, I'd understand that, but it sounds like the whole board, practically all of us, did not understand that the difference between that 2 years and 5 years. And hopefully we can keep that from happening, because as that keeps happening, I'm sure the board they get a little bit more frustrated with us not following direction. So again, I hope that we do a little better job of listening and understanding what's going on in the future. So thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts. Any other discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote. Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director DeSalvo?
Yes.
Director Potts?
Yes.
Director Mayfield? Director Mayfield, we're calling for the vote.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Director Gosa?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. And just so everybody out there realizes, our board members that are on the phone are most likely muted, and they have to find their mute and get to it. So oftentimes there's a little bit of a delay before they get a chance to talk with us. May I have a motion regarding approval of contract with AEA9?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move the board approve the contract with the AA9 to assist in hiring certified teachers to provide compensatory education hours at the cost of approximately $201,667.57, which includes a 2.5% administrative fee charged by the AA9.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director DeSalvo.
Interim Superintendent Sneckloff, can you describe what these staff will be doing?
Sure, I've asked Susan Downs to answer this question.
Do I have it on? Oh, I do. Okay. So they will be providing compensatory ed to any of the students when we've held meetings.
Can you pull it closer to you?
Oh, now it's green. Okay. I don't know what I did. So they will be, the AEA will be hiring teachers to provide the compensatory ed to our students who require it. We were struggling recruiting teachers within our district and outside of the district because of the pay that we're allowed to provide, and the AEA offered to take over and kind of work through some barriers for us, which basically saved us.
Any other discussion? Director DeSalvo.
And this might be more for Claudia, but where is this money paid out of, Claudia? Is it general fund? Or is it special?
Yes, it's general fund, and it'll be coded as a special education expense.
Thank you.
Won't it be weighted dollars?
Did somebody say something? I couldn't hear.
I had
You did?
just asked if it would be weighted dollars, because they'd be special ed endorsed.
I believe so, and it would then go toward either our special ed surplus or deficit.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. Director Gosa.
I'll just go ahead and direct my question to you. So the compensatory education, that is for all the students that are owed that after the state came in and did their audit and found that these students were shortchanged, so to say.
So we're still doing this, convening IEP meetings. So due to the citations, we had to go back and reconvene IEP meetings and it was about 2,000 students, and we're not done. We've worked through about 850 or 900 so far, and we needed to review the changes that were made in their IEPs to determine if they were appropriate or not, because we made those changes using an amendment without a meeting versus holding a meeting previously. And for the students that it was determined it wasn't an appropriate change in their services, we have to provide compensatory ed. And I think it's between 20 and 24% of the students that we've met on so far have required compensatory ed.
So this amount could go up.
Actually,
based on what
this
it is.
amount includes a sort of an estimation based on the number or the percent of students that are requiring it and the percent and the number of IEPs we still have to hold. So this is an estimation of what it could possibly be as a maximum. We're hoping it'll be less than that, but this includes additional hours.
Okay. And then I assume as this comes, there'll be a chart with each student's name on it that they got it, and it'll be reviewed by yourself as well as the interim superintendent and probably the associate superintendents to make sure that it's getting done properly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Director Beck and Director Mayfield, I'll try to allow a reasonable time for you to get in. If I don't hear anything, I'll just assume that you don't have anything to add and we'll continue on.
I do not.
Okay, thank you.
I do not.
Okay, thank you very much for letting us know. Then I will call for the vote. Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director DeSalvo,
Yes.
Director Potts,
Yes.
Director Mayfield,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of long-range facility plan revisions?
Mr. President,
Director DeSalvo.
I move that the board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the long-range facilities plan project list revisions as presented in the SAVE and PEPAL project plan spreadsheets as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director DeSalvo.
So I look at these documents and I look at them as, I think, a term we previously used when we were talking about some budget numbers is it's fluid. It's a 10-year plan and it can absolutely change. So I'm looking at some of the projects on here and I know there were some dates on some of them, but I would really like more of a concentrated plan, I guess, to know like what we have in the works right now, what, you know, some of the dates listed on here. It's just ever changing, and I'm hoping that we could kind of get more updates on what's in the works right now, what's coming up next. I mean, literally step by step or next by next. I don't even know if that's possible, but there's just an awful lot on here, and I think we're going to see some changes as we have discussions later this evening about things that we're contemplating for the future of our district. And some of the items that are on this plan could change significantly based on those discussions and other plans related to budgets.
Is there any other discussion? Director Hayes.
That was to one of my questions. Number 6 on the list for the renovation of the chiropractic office for restrooms and concession. There was no time frame noted on that at all. All the others had at least a year on them, but there was no time frame noted for that one. And on the Central Welding Auto Shop classroom, that one was, is there any reason that that one was listed twice? It was listed on the first page on number 5, and then it was also listed under the PEPAL amount on item number 4. And I was wondering if it was something that Palmer was going to use and it was for their lab accreditations. Why are we paying for it out of PEPAL?
When we acquired the shop building that is currently auto and welding for Central High School, that building had a section that served as a backup vivarium for Palmer that is required for them for their accreditation, and we have now found another location for that backup until they get their new one built. So we'll be able to do the renovation, which was to create a classroom for welding and auto that would be in the same building there. So we were only waiting for Palmer, and it was part of the original purchase agreement that we would retain their backup vivarium until they found a new place. That's now been done, and we would start that this spring and have those renovations done hopefully by the start of school in 19.
So basically, in the agreement for them to use the building, we take care of all the maintenance. How long is, you have any idea when they'll build for themselves? Because they've had a huge renovation project over there now, and it wasn't included in that at all?
No, they had one plan that we expected was going to be done actually a couple of years ago, and for some reason that didn't come to pass. But they have a new plan. But in the meantime, as part of our purchase, we agreed that they could maintain that as their backup until they secured a new place. That's underway, and now we're able to get the renovations done to provide that classroom. And we would, it's not a huge project, so that would be done for the start of school next year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Director Hayes.
No.
Hello?
Director Mayfield.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what will happen to the space where those operations are being held if they're moving to that building there. Or has there been plans made? We're making a plan to move it, but not necessarily use that space.
I didn't get the first part of that.
Clyde, you need to repeat that question. We couldn't hear you.
Okay. We are talking about doing the rehab and moving the auto shop, moving it all up there in that Palmer space when they are gone, but we're worried about where is it at what we're gonna do to rehab the place where we're at now. Has been plans made for that auto shop and welding shop down in the central main building when it all moves out?
Yes, when we built the pool, the central auto and welding shops were moved into the former Palmer shop building. That's where they currently are. A portion of that building remains leased to Palmer, and they're now able to move out, and that portion of the building was going to be renovated starting this spring to become a classroom for welding and auto in that same building where welding and auto currently resides.
So there's none of that operation up by the pool or in that area?
No, that has been completely replaced in the former Palmer shop building.
Well, that's what I was asking, yes. All right.
Any other discussion?
Yes, I have one question.
Sure, Director Beck.
I don't know if I missed it or if there wasn't an answer. Director Hayes had asked one of my questions, why was it listed twice in 2 columns? Could I hear the answer to that? Or in 2 lists?
That was an accident on my part.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? I've got a couple of questions. I want to make sure that I understood the letter that you attached. It sounds to me like what you are suggesting is that solar has been, and I really want to get this solidified, because after the last meeting, when I asked other board members what they thought, I think that there's a difference of opinion or a misunderstanding or miscommunication between what we said and what we think the administration thinks we said. And when I read the letter, what the letter says to me is that basically solar is not going to happen for at least 10 years unless you happen to get a power purchase agreement that comes along. But other than that, all of the other monies that had originally been kind of set aside for solar are no longer set aside, and solar, according to this 10-year plan, does not exist in our district. Is that correct?
The funds that had been earmarked for solar, $3 million over 2 years, have been reallocated, some to other energy efficiency things, and some to reorganize other projects. Reason being, we came away from the October Committee of the Whole with the understanding that the board did not wish to spend capital dollars on the outright purchase of solar arrays, but did wish to entertain a power purchase agreement approach for solar arrays.
And I just wanted to verify that. So in 10 years, unless somebody comes along and says, we're going to give this to you free, our district is not planning on doing any solar, right?
There's no funds for outright purchase of solar, correct?
Okay, all right, so that's very clear, and I guess that's where we are. One other thing that concerns me, and I've brought it up in the past, and I just wish the administration would think about this, is that, and as we just talked there, we have 10 years, we have a 10-year commitment basically to not do solar. And I think that most people in our community take these 10-year plans very seriously, and that it is as if we promise something 10 years from now. And it's very, very difficult to change, even though I know you say we can, and we do occasionally. But once it's there and you get that school or that community believing they're going to get something next year, well, in 8 years, 7 years, 6 years, it becomes more and more difficult to modify that. And I'm only suggesting that 10 years is a long, long time. And if it were feasible, I'd like to see something shorter, like a 7 or 8 year plan with some contingencies out there where the administration is thinking about, here's maybe the future, but not publishing it as basically as a promise. It's just a suggestion. Is there any additional discussion? Director DeSalvo.
I agree with what you're saying, President Johansson, and it is difficult to look 10 years out in the future. And I'm very interested in some of the projects happening now, but they could literally change at the end of the night with our discussion. So I have great concerns, and some of these I'm in favor of them, some of them I'm not. So it's very difficult to make that projection, but I would like a more concentrated update of things in the works, things coming up next, some sort of prioritization. I think that would be helpful. I'm not sure what, I guess I understand we have to have this projection in place, but it is very fluid and it's very difficult to approve. Again, we've struggled with this a lot, approving something that's that far in advance that can change a lot. So I agree with where you're going with that.
So I want to continue on that because I don't think there's anything in code or in our policy that requires 10 years, is there? Isn't that just because that's the way we've always done it?
Yes, sir.
And so we could make a 2-year plan if we wanted to.
You can.
Yeah, I think at least Director DeSalvo and I are suggesting that maybe there's a different way. I'll leave it at that. Any other discussion? All right.
Mr. President?
Director Beck.
Yes, thank you. I second or third what you and Director DeSalvo said about having such a long plan. And I am wondering also, sometimes I feel like when we prioritize, are asked to prioritize things, we do so, but when, at least in my personal, what I mean when I prioritize things is we do them if we can. So for example, we were asked to sort of list things in order: solar, putting preschools in the elementary schools, things like that. In my understanding, that shouldn't necessarily be set in stone because sometimes things come up, a boiler breaks somewhere, or an athletic facility needs to be rehabbed. And I may not know that athletic facility needs to be rehabbed 5 years from now, even though I think it's important to add, say, preschools to all of the elementary schools. Just because I say that's my number one priority out of a list of things doesn't mean I expect it to be done yes or no. It's not set in stone. I think I'm trying to, hopefully that makes sense. So I think as we maybe think about these long-range plans and we're asked to prioritize things, we do so somehow with the understanding that, yes, this is what we ideally would like to be able to fund, and these are sort of the things that are most important to us. But if we can't do that, we know that there are other things that we may have to pay for.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, we will call for the vote. Director DeSalvo.
Yes.
I failed to document the second. Who's Director Gosa? Okay, thank you. Director Gosa?
Yes.
Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director Potts?
Yes.
Director Mayfield?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
Yeah, I got you.
Yes.
Yep, thank you. And I want to explain something before I vote on this. I believe that the general budget is something that our whole community is going to be challenged with over the next while. And I think that the board and the administration are going to be considering this, and one of the ways that I have advocated for a long time is to use Pebble or Save money to purchase things like solar panels, which then can decrease the expenditure of general fund money for power, which is right now what we do. And I think that we're going to struggle with a lot of issues. It's going to be amazing what's going to happen over the next several months. And so when I see dollars being used for some of these other renovations, which certainly are valuable and appropriate, but then if I see that general fund dollars are going to have to be cut, which I know that they are, and that we as a district are unwilling to even consider a method of converting Save or Pebble to general fund savings, which then goes to pay for our employees. It's very difficult for me. And so for that basic reason, and not any reason attached to the approach of the long-range facility plan, other than that philosophical difference, I'm going to vote no. But the motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approve the purchase of 725 East 36th Street property?
Mr. President,
Director DeSalvo.
I move that the board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the offer to buy real estate for purchase of the residence at 725 East 36th Street for a price of $113,500, and authorize the board president and board secretary to take any necessary steps to complete the transaction.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
All right. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Director DeSalvo.
So, Mary, can you bring up the aerial view, please? So, continuing with the discussion that we just had of long-range facilities plans, this is one of the properties in a long-range plan near the Brady Street Stadium and the central baseball and softball complexes. Eventually, the district hopes to purchase the property here to make that one big athletic facility for Central High School. Correct.
Yes, the current plan is to relocate the baseball field that you see in the lower left corner out of the floodplain where it currently lies to the north side of 36th Street. We have traded property with the National Guard. Most of you already know that, for the motor pool you see in the lower right-hand corner of this photo, and for the Armory building on Brady Street. The long-range plan for several years has been to move baseball so that it would no longer be subject to flooding. And we have acquired 3 of the houses. After this one, there will be 2 remaining. Both those owners have said they're willing to sell. The area that's now baseball and those homes would become practice fields that would be allowed to flood when Duck Creek floods and not do any damage to anything. And baseball would be next door to softball, and they'll share concessions and restrooms and things similar to West Kimberly. So that's the plan for that property.
We commented earlier about other properties in this area, the chiropractic home that we've purchased. And I'm a little worried about converting that into concessions when we know another concession stand is coming in this long-term plan.
We would not duplicate those facilities when baseball is relocated. We haven't exactly figured out precisely what that specific plan would be, but we will be taking over what's currently the bus lot and the facilities that are there to support baseball and to support the complex. So we wouldn't be duplicating facilities.
That's what I was just wanting to make sure we're not building and constructing something that a couple years later we're going to tear down and use for something different. I didn't want to waste those funds. And my other comment to the plan would be looking at our other high schools to make sure that we're giving them equivalent facilities. I know we have a complex out for the West High School, and I don't know about North. I do know about North, but there isn't the complex there that these two high schools will have. So I would think, as we're planning long-term, perhaps that could be something that could be considered to make them all equal. Thank you.
That is reflected in the long-range plan you just approved to move up the West Athletic Facility. North's athletic facility design is underway right now for construction next spring. Then West would be moved up sooner than had previously been the case, and Central's will occur when this bus lot relocation happens.
Director Gosa.
So I'm assuming this is going to be used for like practice football fields and stuff, probably soccer fields. I could hear an echo. Am it loud now? Is this where these houses are? That's going to be practice football fields and probably soccer fields, I would assume, right?
Yes, football, soccer, marching band.
Okay. So then they won't be using Brady Street Stadium to practice all the time while everybody else is slopping around in the mud?
I don't understand the question.
Never mind. Like I said earlier in the meeting with the houses, obviously they're going to get tore down or whatever, but I would like to see something with the fire department to let them come in and do their controlled burn. I mean, that saves us on cost too, on demolition and everything like that. So again, I'll echo what Director DeSalvo said. We do so much for Central. It's time to start sharing the wealth with the other high schools. I mean, we have Mid-City, we have West, we have North, and then, well, Keystone, but Keystone's not really that. But I'm going to leave it at that.
Any other discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. Director DeSalvo?
Yes.
Director Potts?
Yes.
Director Mayfield?
Yeah.
Director Gosa?
Yes.
Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to some discussion items. First is a leadership profile report presented by HYA, our superintendent search firm. And this discussion, I think, is going to be led by Ted Blazing. Mr. Blazing, is there any other introduction you need before you start?
No, I don't believe so. It's just that it's my pleasure to be back here to present the leadership profile report. You as board members chose to reach out to the community and involve their input in putting together what we call the leadership profile report. And my goodness, did the community respond, particularly via the online survey. Over 1,000 people participated, 1,078 to be exact, of which 980 of those participated via the online survey. A nice, robust response there. When Dr. Connie Collins and I were here in the school district on November 1st and 2nd, We met with just under 100 folks in individual and in small group meetings. And so your reaching out to the community was successful. And now you have the wisdom of the crowd. And in the profile report, well, first of all, it's not a great literary work of art, as you read through it. I don't know if it's fact. I don't know if it's fiction. But I can tell you this, it's what people believe, and it's what they're talking about. So with that as a background, we ask basically 3 questions. Number 1, what are the strengths of the school district? What's working and working well? What are you proud? What are the points of pride within the school district? And then we ask for issues and challenges confronting the district. And then finally, we asked for desired attributes and characteristics they would like to see in the next superintendent of schools. And when it comes to strengths of the school district, as Pat said, probably nothing in here surprises you. Facilities bubbled up right away, particularly given that a number of your buildings are almost 100 years old, if not 100 years old. And so that was clearly a point of pride. And I should mention closely related to that was technology. People tended to link those two together. In the online survey, technology ran away with it as the strength of the school district. Almost 80% of respondents listed that as one of their 4 strengths of the school district. So that is known as a strength in the school district. Obviously, each of the high schools was noted for their specific programs that they had in place. At North, the dual enrollment programs; at West, the CTE, career and technical education; obviously the performing arts at Central, and more specifically, the exemplary performing arts programs across the district. The early childhood initiatives were noted by a number of people as being a strength of the school district, and the number of community partnerships that you have with the city and with other groups was also noted as a strength within the school district. Diversity was noted as a strength, and then people would say, but that's also an issue, particularly issues of poverty. So that was a kind of a doubled conversation that many folks had. Let me move to challenges and issues facing the district. No surprises here. As we often see when we visit with school districts, constituents tend to reflect what are the issues of the day. So, finances, yep. Special education, yep. Disproportionality, yep. Those 3 bubbled to the top right away. However, there were others that maybe weren't quite so transparent. The outmigration of students, you're experiencing enrollment decline. You have a lot of company, by the way, around not only in the state of Iowa, but certainly in the upper Midwest. But specifically, folks were talking about the outmigration of students, and they had some opinions about why that was happening. They singled out realtors, and in fact, we listened to a number of stories of families moving in who were deliberately steered to other school districts. They also mentioned negative media coverage and disproportionate coverage of the Davenport schools contrasted with other surrounding school districts. And a number of examples were given to us pointing to that disparity within media coverage. Communication and marketing were noted by a number of individuals, and very forcefully noted, and they felt that not just internal but your external communications needed some major rebuilding, and they again pointed out a number of examples of untimely or lack of a communication both internally and with external audiences. Now, desired characteristics, and we're going to talk about that more in a moment here. But as I noted in the report, it needs to be stated that a large number of people said, somebody like Dr. Art Tate Dr. Tate brought so many good qualities to the school district. And so you'll note that early on in the executive summary of the report, I noted that the voices heaped their praise and recognition on retiring Superintendent Dr. Art Tate. So with that, I'm not going to go into all the details. That's basically the executive summary found on the first 5 pages. And then we start into the summary of comments from the different focus group meetings. And there are 5 groups there. We wound up taking all of the different groups and segmented those into 5 groups. Administrators, and by the way, within the administrators, there were not just Davenport Community School District administrators, but administrators from the AEA. So some of the comments in there might make sense as you read through those. Board members, each of the 7 of you, community members, parents, and then finally staff. And that is your nighttime reading covering some, 29 pages, something like that, in the leadership profile report. The online survey you have under a separate cover, and Mary, can you pull that up for us, the online survey results? And I want to take you in that. There's some data crunching within that, but if you go to page 5, you'll see a table, and it's a color-coded with different columns and rows, and you'll note that there's pretty consistent agreement on what it is that folks are looking for in the next superintendent of schools. They want someone who fosters a positive professional climate of mutual trust and respect among faculty, staff, and administrators, effectively plan and manage the long-term financial health of the district. No surprise there, given what we heard as issues and challenges, and establish a culture of high expectation for all students and personnel. And then it begins to become a little more fractured, and things become a little bit more not as frequently mentioned by all of the different groups that responded within the survey. And by the way, within the survey, you had self-identified administrators, 26 respond, community members, 141, parent of a student attending schools, 271, that was the largest group. Students, we only had 7, there were 7, and then support staff, 149, and then, then teachers, of course, was the largest group with 388 teachers responding to the online survey. So the online survey proven to be a smash, very well responded to by community members, staff, and others. So with that input, we then attempted to put together the summary of desired characteristics. And this is what we feel reflects, as I say, the wisdom of the crowd. You have unique perspectives given your role as school board members. So if there's something within this document, this single page of desired characteristics, that's absent, we need to add that. If something's overstated, we can obviously eliminate that or rephrase it. But we said a leader who has a demonstrated ability or evidence, be visible in the schools and community, communicated as an effective spokesperson for the schools, courageously lead organizational change and strategic initiatives. You've spoken tonight about the number of issues confronting the district that you're going to have to wrestle with over the next few years. That leader's going to have the courage to take those on. Empower and hold accountable individuals within a high-performing administrative team. This one's a bit unique to Davenport. Execute contemporary, efficient, and effective business practices. Again, tying back to the finances. Lead with a depth of pedagogical knowledge and the many aspects of proving an effective educational experience for all learners. make fair and courageous decisions that benefit all students, nurture and maintain an organization in an environment of mutual trust. That was one of those that bubbled up very near the top. Provide leadership and model guidance in developing healthy, productive working relationship with you as school board members, with staff, with the state of Iowa and city of Davenport elected and appointed officials and community organization. That's a tall task, but that's very important. That was mentioned repeatedly. Build those healthy, productive working relationships. They need nurturing and they need some attention. Successfully worked in or have a deep understanding of a school district of similar complexity and sophistication. You know, it's always impossible to pick up somebody from the exact same type of school district size, demography, and bring them in. They're obviously not going to move horizontally, but at least someone who has an understanding and perhaps some background of working in a school district of similar complexity and sophistication. Utilize resources in a fiscally efficient and effective manner. Fiscal acumen is expected, and work collaboratively with you as the board in setting a clear mutual understanding of your respective roles and responsibilities with clear lines of communication. And then we also added an individual who models a willingness to become familiar with and understand the unique history, culture, expectation, and needs of the district, the communities within the district, and the state of Iowa. Don't come in here and start talking about, in Oregon, this is how we do it. This is Davenport, Iowa. This is Waukett. This is the Quad Cities. This is our culture. And then a commitment to the district by becoming genuinely engaged in the community and taking advantage of the many benefits of living here in the Quad Cities. And then obviously the last one, high ethical standards for personal and professional performance and the performance of others. And then we added a couple things on the bottom, eligible to be certified in the state of Iowa. I can tell you I've already been contacted by others that would like to be your superintendent and they can't be certified. And district residency is strongly encouraged. So that's that's the template that we've laid out to try to recruit a candidate that fits this. We'll screen against this, and then eventually you'll start interviewing candidates with this as your template to hold them up against to see how well do they match this. Thoughts on the desired characteristics? A lot of input that led to this.
In fact, Director DeSalvo, I'd like you to take on the leadership of this discussion, especially relative to what Ted just asked, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I would just like to start to thank Ted and Connie for being here and all the work and time and effort that you put into, first of all, meeting with all of those folks. It was a very intense couple days, and then putting together a lot of data for us in a very quick amount of time. So it's very important in helping us make this incredibly important decision, and these tools will definitely help us in that direction. So there's a lot of data out there. I would invite the board to take the time to look at it. We've got to, things are going to start turning quickly, so we've got to make some very important decisions. So are there any comments or questions about what's occurred, where we go to next? Director Hayes.
I too want to thank you, Ted, as well. There was a lot of information captured here in those sessions. And I must admit, I did go online, but it was like 2 a.m. on Monday morning, so I was too late. But with the questions that were there, and I just like the way you gathered all the information and compiled this. I read through a lot of it, and a lot of the things I hadn't even thought of, but I'm glad that everything is kind of wrapped up here, that we know what we're looking at.
Yeah. You know, both Connie and I commented that we felt that the folks that we met with were incredibly candid with us. And that's helpful. They gave us unvarnished comments. Sometimes not the easiest to listen to, but they were direct. They had opinions, And they were also very appreciative of having their voices heard. So you're right. It was a long couple of days, but it was a very rewarding couple of days. A lot to digest. I did not, in my wildest dreams, believe that the profile report would be as voluminous as what it turned out to be. But people had a lot to say. At the end of our meetings and at the end of the online survey, respondents could give us a name of someone that they thought might be a good fit for the position. Pages. Let's see. There were about 100 folks made suggestions. Now, many were duplicates, okay? But within that, I can tell you that there were 14 staff members within the Davenport schools who they felt would be a good superintendent. Now, I'll quickly add that a number of them, I'm certain, are not licensed, but they're liked, and they have fans right here in the school district. We've made contact with, look at my notes here, with over 60 individuals that we've tracked down or that have expressed some interest in some way. That sounds like a great number, and people always want to know, well, how many have applied, or how many are interested, and I have to remind everyone, we're looking for one. We're just looking for one. So we'll see. There are probably 20 some that have actually started or completed the application process. That's just the beginning. We're still 2 full months away from the date that we'll bring forward 5 candidates, maybe 4, maybe 6, for your consideration. But people had strong opinions.
Along those lines, Ted, can you just describe to the board the next steps that happen? So you kind of alluded to you're starting your screening now based on the data that you collected from our
Right.
community. Can you just kind of comment what happens next?
What happens next? Thank you. That's a great segue on my list of things I want to make certain that we covered tonight. At our planning meeting, back in October, early October, we laid out a calendar. So I want to refresh your memories on that and make certain we have those dates chiseled in stone. You're not going to see much of me around here for a couple of months. And it's not because I don't love you and that I want to come back and spend time here. It's that we're going to be out recruiting now. And we've started that. The ads are up and running. We've started reaching out to folks that we believe might be a good fit. And so between now and January 22nd, we're into the recruitment phase of the search process. On January 22nd, we will do 3 things. We'll present a slate of candidates to you that will be already scheduled for you to be interviewed. That's almost anticlimactic. We'll also have a seminar, workshop with you for the interviews. Now, prior to that date, you're going to receive from me several suggested questions that you might want to ask the candidates. And the questions will be aimed at the desired characteristics. So we'll probably wind up 12, 15 questions. The more questions, the less depth you'll get from the candidates. And we'll want each question to be asked the same way by the same board member. So if Daniel has a question that he's asking, he's going to ask it of each of the 5 or whatever there are candidates in the same sequence, because we want to treat that initial first round interview exactly the same for each candidate. So that's the kind of thing we'll talk about at the January 22nd workshop. But I'll be sending you ahead of time suggested questions. You can modify, come up with your own, but let's get a running head start on that. Otherwise, we'll need to bring our pajamas to the meeting because it takes a long time to process through those questions. So I'll send all those to you ahead of time. You can send some feedback to me. And so at that January 22nd meeting, we'll finalize those. We'll talk about the workshop. We'll talk about what to listen for, what to watch for, how to get the best interview out of each of the semifinalists. We'll also talk about the final stages of the search, make certain we've got all of our dates and what we want to have happen next. So that'll happen on January 22nd, which I believe is a Monday. And then on January 25th and 26th, you need to block the evening of the 25th and the morning of the 26th on your calendars. So block that. We'll have candidates. The candidates will be here to interview on either Friday evening, afternoon, evening, or Saturday morning. And we tend to use a Saturday because, as you know, school administrators are busy people. They don't want to be out of their district for an extended period of time. Some of them might be traveling here, so we'd like to give those that are coming the furthest distance the option of coming in on a Saturday. They can come in Friday night, interview with you on Saturday, be back in their office by Monday morning. So block that. We'll come up with the times for the interviews and have that all set. But those are the next two important dates. And then I will meet with you on Monday, January 28th, and we will narrow the field. We'll narrow the field down likely to 3 finalists. We like 3. If you have a runaway number 1, once in a while you can skip that. It's almost, well, it hasn't happened in the last 30, 40 searches that I've done. So likely we'll narrow it to 3. Why not 2? Well, you can, but if one of the candidates chooses to withdraw, then you're left by 1 by default. Doesn't feel good. So we'll try to narrow it to 3 that evening, and then we'll invite them back to spend time in the district, each candidate, on either February 5th, 6th, or 7th. You don't need to block your days on February 5, 6, and 7. You do need to block late afternoon and evening for a second round interview. That second round interview with the candidate will likely be longer than the first round interview, and it's much less formal. It's more informal. You will have gotten to know a lot about the candidate, and the candidate will have learned more about you, so you're likely to get more questions in that second round interview. And in that second round interview, you'll have specific questions you want to follow up on with each candidate. Each candidate may have answered them a little differently. So some candidates you're saying, no, I'm very comfortable with my question. But the question that Linda asked, I need to drill down on that a little bit more. So that will be, as I say, much less structured, more informal, and likely longer. We also suggest that if possible, the board take the candidate and their significant other to dinner, or at least have some kind of info. If not, take them somewhere, have a something here or wherever you choose to meet to interview them. That's a little less formal, a little chance to get to know them, a little bit about maybe their family, a little bit about their background as a person. So what I'm telling you is February 5, 6, and 7, reserve those evenings to meet with the candidates. That, then, I will meet with you on February 9, and as I say, hopefully we'll send white smoke up the chimney on February 9. We'll identify a preferred candidate. Then you'll need to move into contract negotiations. We'll worry about that later on. So those are the dates. That's what's coming next. And then there are 2 pieces of information that I need, and you can meet later to discuss this. One, compensation. I've got one piece of advice on compensation. If you pay this person $25,000, $250,000, or $2.5 million, you're going to be criticized by someone in the community for paying them what you're paying them. Pay them what's right to start. I've seen many times, in fact, I just visited with someone today, superintendent comes in, brand new, they brought them in at a very low salary, and now they're confronted with, they've got to bring that salary up to make them competitive within their cohort group. Guess what? The community and staff saying, why is that person getting a 10% boost when I'm getting, 2? So get it right to start with. I know Art's salary was unusually low compared to others in comparable sized school districts. So that'd be my only piece of advice. That's your decision to make. And then secondly, and the final piece of information I need is to what degree of confidentiality can we assure the candidates that their name will not be released? Successful administrators working in a school district, it's very difficult for them to have their name trotted out there that they're looking at another opportunity somewhere. They will say, no, I'm not going to subject myself to that. So that's a decision that you have to make. It's not an election, it's not an inspection, but a selection with very rigorous both professional and personal review of their backgrounds. So those are the two pieces I need in the future. And
Any questions from the board? Director Gosler?
On the characteristics, there is one thing I would like to see added to that. I've seen that it said empower and hold accountable individuals within a high-performing administrative team. But I would like the next superintendent to be accountable and willing to take ownership when something, am I saying it loud enough? Okay. I would like the next superintendent to be accountable and take ownership when something's wrong. Own it, admit it, let's fix it, correct it, and move on. That's a huge thing, I feel. And that might just be me, but.
Yep. I'll try to modify a statement in there to reflect that, if that's okay. See what I can do.
Other questions? President Johansson?
I have one.
Oh, Director Beck. Go ahead, Director Beck.
Sorry. So I know, Ted, when Julie and I first talked with you, we asked sort of whether the issues that face our district would provide a particular challenge for finding a good superintendent in the future. And you assured us that there was nothing unusual about our district. Given now that we are facing a phase 2 accreditation evaluation, does that change your answer to that question?
I think it could, if that doesn't go well.
Okay.
But that remains to be seen. That's also, Allison, that's also, that's a foreign language to those from outside the state of Iowa. What's phase 2? What's that all about?
Okay.
So we may need to provide a little more information to candidates, particularly those who express an interest from outside the state of Iowa, so that we're transparent to them on exactly what's going on.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
President Johansson?
Thank you. Just a couple things. When you say in your demonstrated ability or evidence to, and down about in the middle, it says make fair and courageous decisions that benefit all students and the district. Is all students, does that refer to all students in the district?
Yes.
Okay.
And that wording was carefully chosen. The word all was something that I heard many of you speak about as we met with you. And so that, many times if you saw something similar to this for another district, it would say, courageous decisions that benefit students. No, all students. Difference.
Okay.
There's a difference
Thank you.
between the two.
There's one that's a process question that I'm not going to bother us with right now. And then the other one is that when I look at these, there are 3, 6, 9, 12 characteristics that you list there, which seems like a lot.
It is.
And you didn't indicate, I don't think, you just said these are listed in alphabetical order, but you didn't suggest that they were prioritized in any way.
Correct.
So when you look for candidates, and as we look at these characteristics, are we kind of to develop our own thinking of prioritization on an individual basis, on a board basis, using this? I mean, how do we winnow this down a little bit to something that's a little bit more manageable?
Do you mean weighted, like weighting the questions? You mean weighting the questions? Is that where you're headed? Like,
No, I'm
okay,
not.
Just prioritizing.
I'm just talking about the characteristics. I don't care whether we weight the characteristics. I don't want to weight questions. I'm just thinking a characteristic like be visible in the school's community, interacting comfortably. How do I think of that as a prioritized characteristic of the superintendent candidate?
Right. It's a good question. And you can certainly, I can almost assure you as you sit here this evening, you've got a priority. If we went through this, you'd be able to say, these are the 4 or 5 that bubble to the top of my mind. And these 4 or 5 are maybe not as important and the rest are okay. I think that will come out in your questioning as you choose questions to ask, particularly in that first round interview. Because if you just choose one from each area, you've already used up pretty much the entire interview. So give that some thought between now and January 22nd, when we have to make final decisions on those questions. But that's an excellent point. And to that issue of being visible, it's not uncommon. A lot of searches we're involved with, they want someone to be visible. Following Art Tate, and with the amount that he was visible in the schools, that's a pretty high bar. That's going to be a pretty tough one for anybody to come in and continue to be as visible as Art was. That was the reason that was put in there. A number of people mentioned it because they liked it, staff in particular. They liked it. He knew me. He was in my classroom. Saw him in the buildings. Saw him everywhere. So it's going to be a tough one for somebody to come in and replicate.
Okay, that explains it a lot. Thank you very much.
Other questions from the board? All right.
You're going to hear from me. I'll send you updates from time to time on things we feel good about and things we're gnashing our teeth about. I'll also be sending you here after the first of the year probably a laundry list of questions that will be reflective of the desired characteristics, and get those back to me. We'll get a running head start before that meeting on January 22nd. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. Enjoy your time now, because once you get to the end of January, you're going to get busy, and you're going to get probably lobbied by each other, and you're going to have a lot of reading to do and a lot of background work to do. And then when we get into the interviewing and selection, someone will say, I feel, well, feelings are important, But remember, you asked, and you had the input of over 1,000 folks on what they felt was important in the desired characteristics. So we'll keep going back to that as our touchstone to make decisions on. And we'll see where this path might lead us.
Well, thank you again, Ted. I really appreciate all of your time, this great information that you... Oop, I'm sorry, Director Beck?
Sorry, accidentally hit mute.
No, that's okay. Do you have anything else from Director Beck or Director Mayfield before we let Ted go back in his presentation tonight?
No, I'm very happy with what I've heard from Ted. I don't recall working with Ted as far as superintendent research before. I do know who Ted is. But I can't wait to read the report, the leadership report that he has that gives me a little bit more detail to go by. One thing that I do know for sure, that I think he did a pretty comprehensive, should I say, study or talk to the community. But the answers you get definitely make a difference as to who you talk to. And I know he's trying to be a fair and partial person. But again, with that, I also know who I would have talked to and who he would have talked to. And we might have got a few different answers, but principally the same. You know, fairness runs across all lines. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're black, white, green, or yellow. If you are a fair person, it is well noted. So when you see things that pop up that keep being reiterated, whether it's fair or not, then you probably know there's some truth to it, no matter what it is. So again, I'm looking forward to reading his report, and it really sounds good. He did his research. So thank you for what you've done. All right?
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Yeah, thanks, Clyde. By the way, when you read through that, you're going to find some comments that are going to look very familiar to you.
Well, thank you again, Ted. This is, again, great information for us, and your work and time are very much valued, so we sure appreciate it.
We
Anything
shall
else?
see you on January 22nd.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you, Julie, for leading that. It was interesting as Ted was closing his comments and he said, we're going to be busy by the end of January. And I thought, that's a great segue to our next discussion item, which is the budget, because it's likely that we'll be busy with that even up to that time. And so it's getting, yes? What? Oh, I apologize. I missed one. You're calling for a break?
Like 2 minutes.
Okay, Director Gosa would like a break, and we'll go ahead and take a 5-minute break. It'll be a recess. How's that? Before we get started. All right, we'll go ahead and get the meeting going again. Thank you very much. We'll move on with our next discussion subject, which is our State Board of Ed meeting, and Interim Superintendent Schneckloth will lead. I'll follow, and then any other board members or administrators that want to add in. We want this to be a pretty representative review of that meeting.
So on November 14th, myself, Bill Schnaden, President Johansson, and the other board members that were there, Director Goza, Vice President Hayes, Director Potts, and I think Director Beck participated by phone. And the purpose of the invite to the state school board was to discuss our progress or lack of progress on our 8 citations in our special education audit. And basically, the outcomes of that are they were not, as rightfully so, not impressed with the progress that we have made on our citations to this point. And they gave us lots of feedback on and next steps. And one of those was to make sure that we are working very closely with our advisor and to make sure that we are doing the heavy lifting. And the second action that the state school board decided to take was to move the district to a phase 2 audit, and which is going to take place at the end of January, start of February. The back part of the state board meeting was the discussion of our budget and what our next steps are going to be in the budget, which I know we're going to talk about as the next discussion item. But we have, I would say, coming out of that state board meeting, a sense of urgency around the special education items that we have there, and the sense of urgency is moving us in the direction to accomplish those things. With that sense of urgency, we know that we can accomplish and rectify the things that are that we're cited for. So those were the two main issues that the state board wanted to discuss with us. That's it.
So I certainly appreciate everybody that had the opportunity to participate in that meeting. And there are certain things I would gauge that there's so much time that's being focused on these issues that nobody really understands the amount of time that our top administrators are spending on this issue. I think is enormous. I think that there are a lot of people in our administration that are spending just unbelievable amounts of time to try to figure out all of this. And and I will say that there may be others on the board that are emphasizing some of these issues besides me. I've been spending an awful lot of time trying to figure out and to push, as we'll talk more in the budget, but I believe that the board has to absolutely be supportive of everything that we need to do with respect to the special ed audit, with respect to the SBRC recommendations, with respect to the budget, and with respect to the systemic disproportionality issues that have been mentioned. And I think perhaps the board hasn't understood some of these things over the past year, and maybe not understood the significance, not understood the sense of urgency, not understood the values that we're talking about. And so I really just wanted to impress on all of us as a board at least the impact that I think that the state board and the State Department of Education and some of the leadership in those organizations is trying to impress on us as individuals and as a complete board. I'll leave it at that for now, but I'd like to open it up to anybody else that was there. Director Hayes.
I just wanted to say that, to add on what Interim Superintendent Sneckloff said, that there was really a sense of urgency for everything with a lot of the changes and the reevals taking place. A lot of those issues is almost needing to have been done yesterday. But we're looking at, was it April 23rd as the date to have all of that information taken care of? However, with the systemic issues, that's ongoing. With the training that's going on, that's, something that's never ended. This has been generations that a lot of these issues have been taking place. And it sounds simple. I know I've said it myself, but it's truly a mindset. You need to just switch different gears and think differently. And I'll just kind of think, how would you like to be treated? Just because we didn't grow up in the same culture does not make me any less different. Once we get those mindsets adjusted, I think we'll notice noticeably changes with that. But there's just a few people that aren't there quite yet. We have to get those gears turned around. And with that additional training, and especially with the VABing, I think if they right away think VAB to validate it and just go through all those steps right away, that over time that it is something that can be worked with. But I can't begin to express how urgent this is, and we need to all get on board and just work with it. I've had numerous hours of various meetings with Sandy and reading different things and going over and just trying to figure it out and working with people. And it's 7 items on the list. However, 7 items in all the schools, the entire district. That's a huge chunk of information that has to be worked through. And the only thing I can see is just working through it one building at a time. And at some point, we all need to get on board and make it happen.
Director Gosa.
I'm going to go at this at a completely different angle. I was there. I sat in that meeting. I do think that the special ed audit was a good thing. We needed that. I'd been bringing up stuff about that for a couple years. I feel bad that I dropped the ball and I didn't pursue that harder like I should have. And to hear parents up there calling for our impeachments and stuff like that, that's hard to hear. I feel like I really let them down, especially having my own kids in the district. And the way they made it sound, they just wanted us to fire people, heads to roll. I get that, and I did put in a request for that later on. I understand that. One of the other things that I kind of found ironic was they mentioned that I call in for board meetings a lot. I'm sorry. I have 4 kids at home and a wife. I have bills I have to pay. I have to work for a living. My job requires me to be out of town right now. And the one board member that brought that up, ironically enough, had to write a letter because they couldn't be at the board meeting, so I kind of thought that was a little cute. I think a lot of this is politics, too, because we brought up the $175 per student. They're pissed at that. We brought that to light, so now we got to pummel Davenport down so every other district won't stand up and say anything. There was a huge show of power there. I saw that. I think it's sad that our kids have to suffer for that, and it shouldn't be that way. It should be you come to school to get an education, to learn something. We did let kids down. We did. We need to do what's right by them and make that right. And again, I'm saying this as myself. Now, I'm not speaking for the rest of the board. This is me. I feel I did drop the ball. I'll own that. I mean, if you can't own up to it, then you shouldn't be sitting here. I took away a lot of stuff from that, and then there's various other things, and we've had discussions and stuff like that. And I do get their part wanting to involve the community, and I do understand that, and I think we should do that a lot more than we do. There are some things that you can't do that, obviously, like real estate and stuff like that, because then it gets out to the other party. It was the longest ride up there for the shortest meeting, and then turn around and ride back home. I do care about this district. I was supposed to be on vacation. I stayed at home just so we could go to that meeting. So for someone to write a letter because they couldn't even be at a meeting to say that I don't care about the district and I don't have a vested interest whether I have kids in the district or not, all those decisions that happen here affect me directly. I have 3 kids in the district. I'll have 4 in a few years, but it really irritated me to no end for someone to sit there and say that. Again, I do understand there are things that were wrong that should have been fixed, and they're getting corrected now. I think there was a huge power struggle between the board and the superintendent. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I could tell you there's a brick wall right there, but you're going to run right at that brick wall no matter what I said. It is what it is. We've moved on from that. Hopefully things can change for the better now. But I take ownership of that. I do feel, to be honest, I felt discriminated on while I was up there because I work for a living and I can't be here every night. I know, obviously, there's parents that are working that aren't here either. I have a job. My job's not 9 to 5. My job's not, I might work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, 24 hours a day. It depends on what I need to do at that time. I'm here tonight because of the snowstorm and I wasn't able to fly out. Now I got to be to Cedar Rapids in the morning so I could get to my job so I don't lose my job. Again, I totally felt disrespected up there by that board, and I think I don't know how I want to say it. I think it's a dang shame that our kids have to suffer because of politics and everything else. The state discriminates on different school districts every day. They pay less and more, okay? How do they decide who gets less and more? They're discriminating on us. But yet, I do understand that I do own our faults. I do own that, and we're working to correct that. But for someone to sit on a high horse and to say all that stuff that probably gets paid to go to those meetings, I don't get paid. I don't get reimbursed my mileage or nothing like that. I do this because it's the right thing to do because I feel passionate about it. And all the decisions made here do affect me and my family and my kids' friends' families and my family and friends. And again, I know there are a lot of areas that we need a lot of work to get done. And I do feel bad for the special ed kids that didn't get the services they should have gotten. I do have a nephew that is special needs, but he is not in this district. I understand that. And I hope that everything gets corrected, and I will follow that very closely. So I apologize for dropping the ball on that, and I will do my best to make sure it doesn't happen any longer.
Thank you. Director Beck, do you have any comments?
I do, actually. Some of them are along the same line as Director Gosa. I have very good reasons for having to phone in for the last few meetings. And in fact, I was planning on being back tonight, but the weather prevented me from getting home. So hence I have to phone in tonight. So first of all, I think we do owe a lot of our families an apology. And so personally, I'd like to say I'm sorry for whatever hand I had in any wrongdoing that has come to our students over the last year. I asked a lot of the same questions about special education that the State Board of Education was asking, and I should have pursued them harder. I should have followed further instead of just asking the questions and hoping that by asking those, the dominoes would start to fall. There were some things that I didn't realize about how our district was run. And for that, I apologize that I didn't push harder. It was very eye-opening to be at that meeting. And I think we deserve a lot of the comments that they made, not all of them, but most of them. Disproportionality is something we've been grappling with for decades. It's a problem across the nation. We alone are not going to solve it, but we have been working on it. And with disproportionality and with special education, I'd like to see us really become a model for how things should be done in the future. And I know that that is not something that's going to change overnight. I'm certain that there are some teachers who probably, as Director Hayes said, need to get on board. All of us have implicit biases that we don't realize we have, and a lot of the training that we're doing takes time for that to sink in. So I don't think that a cultural shift is going to happen overnight. But I do think as long as we're making a concerted effort and digging in and getting our hands dirty to make those changes, we should start to see progress relatively quickly. So I'm hopeful that after that meeting, we start to see at a more accelerated rate positive changes, and that we can do our best to make amends to families, particularly those who have had issues with our special education department or have been wrongfully disciplined in some way. We can do our best to make amends to those families and to prevent those types of things from happening in the future. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Schneeden, you were up there. Do you have any comments? Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Director DeSalvo.
Well, I would concur with what the prior board members have stated, and I would also like to say that this board is definitely unified, and we all agree that we had failed our students in this district, and we all agree that we could have done more. Hindsight is 20/20. But the important thing to me is that we are working feverishly hard to fix these problems at this time. And for anyone to think differently, to think we're doing nothing, I think you should probably step into the administrative building and see all the work that's going on and has been going on for weeks. We are going to make this right, but any kind of corrective action that is going to be meaningful and have purpose and be sustainable is going to take time. And I ask the community, I ask our staff to, if we want to do this right, we have got to put in the effort. We have got to take the time to do it correctly. Rushing in to correct something is not going to be sustainable, and that's not what any of us want. I think working together is the only way we're going to make this better. We cannot continue going at the public versus us. We have got to work together to correct this. We are not making any progress by pointing fingers. That has to stop. We need to come to the table and get this fixed, and get it fixed right, and get it fixed long term. I would like to apologize to the board members and to the State Board of Education that I wasn't able to attend the meeting in person nor by phone. I work, and unfortunately I was not able to get the day off of work as I had asked. I had prior commitments that I could not get out of. And that happens with a lot of us. Several of us, all of us on this board pretty much work outside of our responsibilities here. And so I apologize to my board members that I couldn't get out of work that day. I won't apologize to the State Board of Education because I do have a job, and that is going to be my priority. Sustaining work and an income for my family. That will always come first. I was disappointed to learn some of the things that were said at that meeting about this board. I had a very difficult time understanding how someone could say having a student in this district does not help someone to make decisions about our district. I strongly disagree with that statement. I'm a parent of a student that graduated from the Danforth Community Schools. I graduated from the Danforth Community Schools. That makes a big difference. Our kids understand, we can talk with our kids, we can relate to the issues. Can we relate to all of them? No. But can we relate to what's happening in our district? Yes, on some levels, absolutely. And I think that that was a statement that I had great concern with. I'm also concerned that our direction was pretty much heads are going to roll. And that's what we were told. And the next discussion after we finish this is going to be how heads are going to roll. And it's very unfortunate because I feel that there are better ways that we could probably have handled this, and we didn't move swiftly enough for people in the community and for people at the board level, and now here we are. So it's concerning, but we have a lot of work ahead of us, and I would just reiterate that the only way we're going to make this successful and sustainable is by working together to find long-term solutions and stop fighting against each other. It's not us against you. We're there. We want to make this better. We've all acknowledged that we've done wrong. Let's move on. Let's make this better, and let's do it together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for all of that. Are there any other comments from the board administrators? If not, we'll move on. Oh, excuse me, Director Mayfield.
Well, not much I've heard that I could disagree with. But at the same time, I realize that we are avoiding what the real issues are and what has happened. Of course, we have different cultures and different people and different perspectives. But I think that is just the tip of the iceberg, because the way we treat each other, and I hate to say it this way, it's the have and have-nots, and we all know who they are, to me is deplorable. Because unfortunately, those that do not always have what we think is the corrective manner of helping them. Just feeding them food is not going to change their situation. It's the same thing as giving them a fish or teaching them how to fish. We have missed the boat on teaching many people how to fish. And we're talking about education. What does that fall to? Well, you know, in this day and age, if you don't have the education, it cuts down on your opportunity. We know that when a kid is in third grade, which ones are likely to go to prison. We are trying to do something, but what we have done is not effective. And that's the whole thing Coach John Wooden said. We have not taught them until they've learned. So we're doing the best we can, but our best has not been good enough. And we're not talking about the staff or the teachers of the last 5 years or 10 years. Got to keep in mind, I've watched every new program come through over 30 or 40 years. We do it a while, then we move on. And we declare the last one a success. Just wasn't good enough. You know, if we look back 100 years, we as society are doing so good compared to what we did 100 years ago. But that does not change the fact that it's not good enough until we all, and when I say all, we all have the same opportunities. When I hear our mission in our vision statement, it makes me shake in my boots, because I know the problems that we have with disproportionality, the problems that we have in our society, not just in school, but going from birth to death. It is all because of how we treat each other. And I think that is the beginning. You know, I've seen people with good intent. We don't like the word racism. It just hurts us all to even say it. But racism exists mainly because of people of color being prosecuted. But we have all types of, what I call it, racism. You know, I always bring up the fact that each and every one of us have a mother or a woman. If you want to know the truth, ask a woman if she's been discriminated against. She will tell you. But you know, the people that run this society do not recognize that. We're insensitive to it. So we have a lot to change within ourselves. And I could go on and on about that. As you know, Ralph, we had our private conversations, but I don't think it's the appropriate time. We do need to come together, but we need to talk with those that we're trying to help, those that have came and have risen from those situations, to see what they would like to see and what to do, and then we'll have some of the answers that we need. But as long as we stand from the outside looking in and with good intent trying to help people, I don't see how we can do it. It has to be collaborative. We got to have the city. We've got to have our community jobs. We got to have primarily education for people to advance their lives and to live the quality life. Or we will see them in third grade go to prison and know who they are. So it's a complex situation. It's not like one answer is going to solve it all. But I do believe that, and you heard me say this before, if we have the will, and so far I've not seen the will, but if we have the will in our emotions and what we do every day to make it happen, it will happen. So I have confidence somewhere down the road that we'll find the will. We have a lot of good people that are jumping on the bandwagon. We just got to work together to make it work. So thanks for listening.
All right, thank you very much, Director Mayfield. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to our next discussion item, which is the budget. Interim Superintendent Schneckloth, you want to lead us on that?
So with all of the discussion items that we've had tonight, they can be a little bit depressing. But I want you to know that everybody that I encounter, including this board, our leadership, we see this as an opportunity to improve. And the Phase 2 audit is going to set us down a path. If we have areas to improve, we're going to improve those. We see this as an opportunity to come out of this as a stronger district. In order to move towards a place where we're going to become financially stable with our budget, I think it would be important for me to share with you what has happened over the last month. So I kind of put together a little bit of a timeline that will help explain this sense of urgency this newfound increased sense of urgency that we have around with our budget. On November 1st, I was named the interim superintendent, and the first action was that Claudia and I sat down and looked at the 5-year budget that was being prepared to go before the SBRC. On November 5th, we took that 5-year budget and we tweaked it, we adjusted it, and it was in a very rushed fashion, and I think the board felt that, and I can honor that and appreciate that. The thing that moving forward I know out of the people sitting around this is they're going to demand a level of transparency, and it's welcomed. I want you to know that. The 5-year budget that we presented had some adjustments to it, and it was more aggressive, and I would say that was the first budget that we we were prepared to take to the SBRC that showed us in a positive unspent balance at the end of, I think, 2023. So that was voted upon. November 9th, we submitted artifacts from that budget. And so we sent off all of our items thinking that we were on the right track. November 14th, we went to the state school board meeting, and we went before the state. We received feedback during that visit about our budget. And the feedback was, you have to provide us with a 5-year plan, but you also need to show that you also need to be able to show a corrective action plan that illustrates the district will end the 2020 school year with a positive unspent balance. And that feedback was new to the leadership team and to the school board members that have been participating in the SBRC meetings. So in between November 14th and the current day, we have been calling, receiving feedback, next steps, what should we do? And essentially, we need to put together a plan that shows exactly that. It's a 2-year plan that shows us with a positive unspent balance at the end of the 2020 school year, with a 5-year plan that shows that this is sustainable for us. The sense of urgency that surrounds that for us, and I've had conversations with the union, I've had conversations with our administrators, and we need to begin to move forward. This is going to impact our staffing. We need to, the statement that we are calling it is right size our district. We have not made the appropriate reductions that we need to make in staff. And that's where it's going to be painful. And we need to do it in a quick manner. And so that's where we sit with our budget as of now. And that information is pretty fresh and new to us. And we're trying to, pressed up against a pretty steep timeline of the December 11th SBRC meeting. We are attempting to, we're working with the state to determine what are our next steps with this SBRC and the officials at the state that are going to help guide us in that area. Tom Cooley, we've met with everybody from, or discussed with everybody from Director Wise, Tom Cooley, the School Budget Review Committee liaison. And so we are really trying to determine what are the next steps for us. But the things that we know we have to do are those things. We must be positive unspent by 2020. And that was feedback that was new to us, and it's going to cause us to have drastic actions. And the thing that I want to relay to everybody is that that's not my issue, it's not your issue, it's our issue. And how we move forward with that can really unite us. And everybody that I talk to has that mindset. What do we need to do? In discussing with the administrators, and we're going to finish those discussions tomorrow, we know that there's some heavy lifting and some difficult decisions that are going to need to be made. And so I believe that this can be a chance for us to stabilize ourselves, but it's going to have to be quick. So.
Before I ask for other comments, I want to give it's not quite a counterpoint because we are in this together, but I want to make a couple of comments because, excuse me, TJ and I have been working very closely on this for quite some time, and we have differences of opinions, and that it's not a bad thing, but trying to figure out these next steps is very, very, very difficult. And these are things that I think very few people understand. But I want to give an example that occurred just earlier today. And we've had, as TJ mentioned, and I hope you don't mind me just calling you TJ here for the purpose of this conversation. We have tried to understand since November 14th what exactly is the SBRC looking for? What does the state finance group within the Department of Education what are they looking for? They have guidelines, they have this, they have that. We've tried to interact with the SBRC and with the finance people within the department that assist the SBRC in their evaluation of what's going on. The conversation that we had earlier today, there were at least 4 people on that phone call, and I would guess that it lasted for about an hour. And that was after several emails that had taken place over the weekend to try to, again, get additional information, excuse me, try to get additional information from additional experts that may be able to give us a glimmer of discernment on what is the SBRC wanting from us? We've already submitted the artifacts or evidence, and that was due back on November 11th or whatever the date was, 10th. Excuse me. And yet there's actually another date, which is this coming Thursday. And they said that if we wanted to change the information that we gave them, we have up until this Thursday to make those modifications. My perspective is that I really, really, really want, and I think the board wants, and I think the administration wants, to satisfy the SBRC requirements. That's my sense. We voted earlier this evening on the modified supplemental amount, which is a portion of what we go to the SBRC for, but this budget, the budget issue, the 2 years, the 5 years that TJ mentioned earlier, is what they are really interested in. And from my perspective, we could do it. If we said this is really important and we want to submit the information on Thursday, we could modify it. I think that the administration wants to be more careful. Everybody here knows that I'm willing to make some assumptions and estimates and things like that, that we still, when we present this plan, we're going to have to kind of reconcile it over time. We're going to have to demonstrate that when we say this, that we did it. When we talk about FTEs, it can't just be this level of FTEs versus this level. It's got to be the dollars. And the dollars is what they're going to be looking at. And maybe that we say some number, 50 FTEs is equivalent to this many dollars. But we can't just substitute FTEs for dollars, if that makes sense. So the dilemma that we end up with and the strong discussions that we have are on those types of issues. Should we do it now, submit the paperwork by Thursday? Should we go to the SBRC on December 11th and say, please understand that we're doing our best and we want to come back in March, which means we're going to have to really work hard to have our documentation fully completed in January so that we can submit it appropriately. These are the kinds of issues that we're dealing with, and it doesn't suggest that there's conflict. I don't think. I think it does suggest that we're trying to work together, but there are different approaches and different ideas on what the right solution is. So I just wanted to make a couple of those comments other than, well, I'm sure everybody's going to talk about the urgency. I'll leave that for others. But be aware that those are current, real issues. Director DeSalvo.
Neither one of you presented the dollar figure that we have to cut by June of 2020. Are you willing to share that?
We ended fiscal 18, so June 30th of 18, we ended with negative spending authority, which is cumulative, so it's a 3-year accumulation of approximately $13 million. We will receive some spending authority for the things you've approved at the last couple of board meetings for the special ed deficit, that type of thing, but we don't get that spending authority until this year. It runs behind. So we are starting this year that we're in, basically starting with a deficit of 13 million in spending authority. We have some cuts in place for this year, but we need to make more, and we need to revise that plan and come up with a much more firm dollar amount for what we need to do through the end of fiscal '20. And again, there's assumptions about enrollment projections, assumptions about what the state may or may not do as far as granting 2%, increase, 1%, 0. So we have to kind of work around a lot of those assumptions.
Thanks. So just to clarify, if all remains, let's say worst case scenario, that we don't sustain any cuts this year, and so at this moment in time on our books, we have to show to them that we will reduce $13 million from our budget. So given that, I will go back to my high horse that I was on a little bit ago about working together. I think the board is definitely unified, but where great concern is going to come is from the public again, and some of these extremely difficult decisions that we are going to have to make. Your input is very important to all of us. We listen to what you say. We listen, we read the emails, but we have to make swift and as accurate as we can decisions quickly. And President Johansson, I think you're looking for, and Interim Superintendent Schneckloff as well, that we are all on board. We will support what we have to do. It doesn't mean that we're going to like it, but we know what we have to do. And we have to come together to get past this, to come out of it stronger. And the only way we're going to do that is by being unified. So I would ask for the public support in this very difficult time with these extremely difficult decisions that we're going to have to make.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Director Gosa.
Superintendent Schneckloff, can you put that in perspective, what $13 million in cuts looks like in 2 years? Just roughly, so people get an idea of what it is.
I think we estimated that at 180 positions at around the value of $70,000 positions. Now, we can take different actions in this first year. Our goal will be to keep that away from our employees as much as possible, but that's going to be very difficult to do. Because 80 to 85% of our budget is staff. And the feedback that we've been getting all week from the state is that's where we were negligent and have not been appropriately downsizing over the years. And so that figure is a rough guess, but we have a sense of urgency about that, and obviously that would be, staff at all levels, at central office, everywhere. I mean, the term that we've really started to wrap our brain around is right size for our district. And so when we are beginning to make those decisions, that's the kind of, and obviously we're going to have to do that swiftly, like you said, and being unified is going to be incredibly important.
Okay, keep rolling. One of my other questions is, when are contracts up for some of the bargaining groups? Because we might be able to do something there too. Or the other question I guess I'll ask too, since we're all in this together, and I brought this up sometime before, if all the employees came together and said, hey, we realize you didn't get this from the state, that or whatever, and they were willing to either take a pay cut to save their job or something like that, I mean, how much would that help the budget out?
In really rough numbers, it could be close to $2 million.
Just by that little bit or something? Okay. The only reason I asked that is personally myself, I took a wage freeze for 3 years just so I could keep my job.
And I think your first question was about our contracts. I believe all of our bargaining groups, we have contracts through fiscal '20, through the end of next year. So it would be like the spring of 2020 that we would be negotiating for the 2021 year.
And that's when we already have to have the cuts, the budget fixed by then, correct? Thank you.
Any other discussion? Director Potts?
Am I correct in hearing that we now have some clear and definitive directions from the state on the budget that they allowed us to believe we had 5 years to fix for the last 2 years?
The information that we received from the state today is clear and definitive. And it's in a form that we could write it right now. We haven't, we just had the discussion earlier today. But however we had that perspective on the 5 years is not what the SBRC is looking for. As TJ mentioned earlier, they're looking for a positive unspent balance within 2 years, which means by June 30th of 2020, we will have a positive unspent balance. And they want a 5-year plan that shows that our budget is sustainable over 5 years.
So the 13 million that we're talking about, we already have certain amounts already programmed for cuts in this school year and next school year. So if those are subtracted from the 13 million, what is the remaining balance?
I can't answer that. I don't know if Claudia can at this point or not.
Probably can. Not at this point, but that's what we're going to be really digging into and looking at. And again, based on now we have enrollment numbers
We
for
should
this
know that.
year that'll affect next year's funding.
I just think we should know that by now.
When I look at the budget sheet, the 5-year plan, it showed us as, at the end of this coming year, we would have been down to 6 million, but then we would have still had 6 million in unspent balance negative. So those two numbers together is close to 13 million. So even though we're taking the money off this year, our other costs keep rising, which is why we're 13 again. Lack of student enrollment, increase in everything, personnel. Am I saying that right? So I mean, our target, I would think, would still be 13 million when we go to the room tomorrow, trying to figure out what those numbers are.
Any other discussion? Director DeSalvo.
I would just comment that at our high-level legislative advocacy discussion, the outlook for funding from the state looks pretty gloom. I would think if we got 1% increase this year, we'll be lucky. There's not a lot of confidence that anyone will support a bill for us for per pupil. So I don't want to put any more gloom in this room, but I think that is something that we cannot count on at all. We cannot count on anything coming out of our legislative session this year that will provide us an increase in per pupil, or supplemental state aid is probably going to come in about, if we get 1%, we'll be lucky. I would also like to acknowledge that these are hard decisions, and we don't we're trying so hard to, and we've tried for such a long time to not pink slip any staff in our district. And that, that's an honorable thing to do, but unfortunately, we're no longer going to be able to sustain that. But I think things that we've talked about tonight, and one thing that Ted also said to us was, we can turn this around to be an opportunity, and that we are going to come out of this, we are going to come out of this stronger, and we're going to come out of this better. And communication of that and the way that we approach it with our community is very significant. And I think if we approach this, that, I don't know, Davenport strong, something to that effect, we are going to get through this, and we are going to be better, and we are going to continue to provide services to our students that they deserve. And we are going to dig into those problems that we have, and we are not going to turn away and say they're done and fixed. We will have long-term solutions, and they will be ongoing. So we've got a lot of hard work ahead of us, and we will get there, and we will get there together. So thank you for all the work and everything that's gone in. And I asked TJ, as a board, what can we do more? I know Ralph has been in a lot of meetings, but how can we help and support?
I think what's going to be critical is the communication. And the communication with internal and external stakeholders, I think, is going to be critical with this. We know that we have to make the staff cuts immediately, but then we're going to get down to, okay, do we want this program or closing a school? Like those issues that were, those items that were on our 5-year plan, the sustainability plan, it's going to be critical that the board be an integral part of those kinds of discussions. So that what I would say, as we move forward, that's going to be really important.
Thank you, and I think I could speak on behalf of this board that we are here to support you in any way that you need, because we all are here because we want to make it better. So thank you.
We're getting ready to wrap up this discussion, but I wanted to check in with Director Mayfield and Director Beck. Do you have any comments on this?
No, I've been following the conversation. Nothing right now. I want to digest what I've been hearing and read the leadership report, and then next meeting, hopefully, I'll have some comments.
Okay, thank you. Director Beck?
Pretty much everybody has already said everything that I would say.
Okay, thank you. The one thing I just really wanted to punctuate is this board support. I do think that the board probably has been reluctant to support some of the suggestions from the administration as we've been presented these 5-year plans. And I know that the board doesn't like certain ideas. One of them, of course, is the whole idea, when the idea came up of closing a school, and that one subject was such a huge issue, and by the time it got mentioned by name, when Superintendent Tate did that, it created havoc in our whole community, in our city, in our district. And and yet, as the board had further discussions on it, and we did discuss with the board, and even our legislators got involved in some of that. Our community got involved, and our schools and mayors. I mean, we had a lot of people that talked to us about those types of activities, and the board did not accept that as a viable option at that time, and the board said we can consider it later. I'm only using that as an example that this board is going to have to seriously support all of these things if we're going to attain those types of budget cuts to get to the positive unspent balance. And I'm sure we'll have more discussions. We're going to irritate people with our decisions. But I think it is, again, what I think the board has to do. And as Martha Bruckman told us several weeks ago, we're just going to have to make some of those hard decisions. I'll leave it at that unless there's anything else. Oh, Director Gosa.
I'll support you on this. The only thing that I will say, obviously, I've always been opposed to closing the school, so get me every possible cut you can before that happens. I'm talking purchasing. If you can get anything cheaper, then you get it. And the only other thing I might ask is the outsourcing, because I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think you're ever going to save any money there, and it's going to cost you more money in the long run. Once you give something up, you don't give it back. So that's my two things. Otherwise, you got my support.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, anything else? All right, let's move on to our last discussion item, which is the special education update.
I've asked Susan Downs to come and give us an update of where we are currently, some of the actions that we're taking towards completing our citations. I'd also like to note that that Associate Superintendent Scott is going to be the administrator on record for the special education office, and so he's really going to be working close with Susan to rectify our citations.
Yes. So as you heard at the state board meeting, they were a little concerned about some of our individual citations because we have around 2,000 individual citations, meaning that we need to hold IEP meetings for those 2,000 students, some of which involved reevaluations. And so any of those that didn't require a reevaluation, we've completed. The reevaluations take a little bit longer, but AEA is working very hard to get them done, and they're very confident that we will have that part of the citations, those meetings held prior to the April 23rd deadline. They're bringing in people from other districts, they're hiring retired staff, they're doing everything they can to help get the reevaluations done in a timely manner. So we're working with that. A big one of the areas of concerns from the State Board and the State Department of Ed was the lapse in our providing the compensatory ed. So the citation says that once an IEP team determines that a student requires compensatory ed, we're to start that as soon as possible. And because we were struggling with getting teachers who were willing to work outside of the school day to provide that, we had a number of students who hadn't started receiving compensatory ed. The contract that you approved tonight will really help with that. AEA says that they've already had interest from 20 additional people, in addition to the staff we already have hired, that are willing to provide compensatory ed. Some of those are teachers, special ed teachers who work in Bettendorf or Pleasant Valley. So we're pretty confident now that we've got the contract, we can start moving forward with hiring more teachers to provide the compensatory ed. Another issue with that is that we didn't have really good real-time data on the minutes that have already been served because we were using the timesheets that the teachers turned in to know when the compensatory ed had been provided. Well, of course, our teachers want to hang on to those and turn them in so they get a lump sum of money, which I don't, I understand. So there was this lapse in time for us to be able to see how many minutes had actually been served. So we've created, people in the office have created a Google form, and we are now going to have teachers do the attendance so that it's up to date, so that all we have to do is go into the system and we'll have better data for you. And so we'll be hoping to present that to you guys at the next meeting, because that system will go online this week as well as we get more teachers in place. I'm trying to think of the other areas. The professional development, you'll notice on the report that Amy Williamson provided to the state board that they keep saying that's in progress, but that's because we have professional development going throughout the year, and our last date is in May. It's close to the end of the school year, and during the professional development, AEA collaborates with us, and we're really trying to help our teachers see how we need to change our practices so that we're doing a better job. Any questions?
I'm thinking there are. Director Potts.
Most of the students that are requiring compensatory education, are they SCI students?
Yes, but there are also some students who were self-contained with behavior services, because one of the citations that we had to look at were their functional behavioral assessments and behavior intervention plans, and if it was deemed that they had an inadequate functional behavioral assessment and/or behavior intervention plan, then the IEP team reconvened to determine if we needed to provide compensatory ed. So some of those students also will receive compensatory ed.
But the vast majority?
So far, the vast majority have been our, what we would consider like level 1 or resource SEI students. So those were the students that we made the decision to move to the 45 minutes, right, of service, many of which had had much more service. They weren't in the least restrictive environment as much of the day, and so we moved to have them in the general ed classroom more of the day, and some of those students, that was too drastic of a move, and as a result, they are requiring compensatory ed so that we can hopefully recover their progress.
And they were, with most of them then moved into classes that were being co-taught between a gen ed teacher and a special ed teacher?
Some of those, but really the 45-minute piece, which was one of the main citations, was most of those were our elementary students who had been pulled out for a good chunk of the day, and we moved to have them in the gen ed room for the majority of the day and then receive, starting with 45 minutes of service.
Okay, so back to my original question as to, SCI type level 1 students, majority of the ones needing compensatory education are those kinds of students by what, 80%, 85%?
I don't know, but I can have that number for you next time.
Well, just ballpark, based on what you know already?
I don't know.
Okay.
I will have to look
Okay.
at that.
And
Because
then-
we did the majority of the ones we did over the summer were for those 45 minutes. The ones we're doing right now that are the reevaluations that are taking a little bit more time, those are the ones for the students who are in more self-contained programs, so, but I can get that number. I can.
And then the majority of them are elementary school students as opposed
They
to-
were for the 45 minutes, yes.
Okay, okay.
But not, we have secondary students who also require compensatory ed.
Okay, so if you've got a kid who's a behavior disorder student who needs compensatory education in behavior, how do you give them extra compensatory education in behavior when most of their day is in behavior classes?
So those were all IEP team decisions. When the IEP team got together and discussed if there was not enough progress maybe, or not expected progress in the area of behavior, then they would work on the behavior goals outside of the school day with a teacher or in a small group to work on social skills. But a lot of that could also be academic related, in that because of behavior, they may have missed out on some academic instruction. So some of the compensatory ed might be over academics as well. And honestly, the IEP team made the determination, or makes the determination. So it could be different for every kid.
I'm out for now.
Okay, thank you. Director Gosa.
You might have said this already, I'm not for sure. Who all is accountable for making sure the students are receiving their compensatory education that they're supposed to receive?
So the teachers assigned to the students are responsible for contacting the students, getting it set up, talking to the parents. But our office will be keeping track of, and has been, keeping track of when that's been provided and if. And sometimes we have students who don't show, so then we reach out to the parents as well to say, can you help us here, in order to get them to attend the sessions.
Okay, so how many people are in your staff that, I'm just, so that it's being monitored, that it's getting done?
Yep. So right now, we have 3 people who are monitoring it.
Okay, and then Mr. Scott is monitoring
And
that
then
as well?
he meets, we have regular meetings scheduled so that we can go over it as well. Yes.
Okay, that's what I was looking for, thank you.
Director DeSalvo.
Can you comment a little bit more about the tracking of time? You kind of lost me in some of how that,
So the way we were tracking if compensatory ed had been provided or the number of sessions that had been provided for the students was on the timesheet, because the special ed teachers are providing it in the evenings, after school or before school, and outside their contract time. So we were tracking it with when they turned in their timesheets to get paid, which is not an efficient way for us to track it. So we came up with another system that I had 2 staff members have been working on, and we'll implement this next week.
okay,
So then we'll have better data.
okay. So data is something that was going to kind of lead to my next question with all of this. A couple of us are numbers people, and we want to see some progress, see some data to support.
Absolutely.
How many meetings have happened? You know, are we tracking the follow-up? Are these things being followed? We can't obviously stop at this. So just, I don't know even how to describe that to get that to you, but it's very important for us to see that progress, and if we can see statistical data to support it, all the better.
Absolutely. So, and this is something for you guys to talk about and decide, but the Amy Williamson from the Department of Ed took the citations and then provided data to the state board. We could take that same format and update that data for you as we get new data.
I think that would be.
Would that be helpful?
That would be helpful.
Okay, then we can do that.
Okay. And then my last question, and I've asked before of predecessor people, how often are your staff getting out to the schools? I mean, how much are they seeing of this action happening?
So it really kind of depends. Many of them are out in the buildings every day to the buildings that they're assigned to, but depending on the other duties that they may have right now, such as providing professional development, if they're on for providing professional development, then they're at the AEA or wherever we're doing that for the PD piece. So it kind of depends on those. The goal is to be out as much as possible, and we're working on sort of developing our role a little bit, refining it or fine-tuning it so that we can make sure that's occurring.
I think it's very important that the folks, the staff in the schools feel they have that support. That's very important for them to understand. And again, back to communication and making sure that everybody understands clearly what the expectations are. I think that's very important. So another thing that we'll look forward to hearing updates on. So thank you.
You bet.
Director Hayes.
Susan, you had mentioned those sheets in Google Drive and the employees hanging on to them to get paid at one time. Is it possible in Google Drive that they can put those hours in daily, so
Yes,
it's updated?
That's what we've changed to. They were actually sending in via the school mail their timesheets. We're going to do it in a Google, I'm not that technologically savvy, but basically it's going to be in a Google form, so it loads up into a spreadsheet so we can pull the data daily.
Okay, thank you.
And we're asking that they fill it in after each session they have so that we have updated information.
Okay, thank you.
Director Gosa.
One other question I have, and it was brought up at the state board meeting, as far as the students that need the IEP meetings, they're still requiring them, and we sent out a letter and didn't get any response back. What are we doing to follow up to make sure that we reach everyone? Because the way they made it sound was what we were doing wasn't adequate enough.
Yeah,
So-
I am planning to work with Kim Hoffman from the AEA, who's been incredibly supportive, along with Sandy, so that we can maybe think of something else we can do to follow up on that, which may be letting the teams know, the case managers know, hey, here are your students that received a letter, could you follow up with the parents? It probably needs to be more of a personal contact versus a letter in the mail. But we can do that, and I agree. That came up at the board meeting, and we should follow up.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Along those lines, Susan, one of the things that the Board of Education kind of mentioned was, what have we done to sort of apologize, I guess, I think that's the word they used, to those families whose children do need compensatory education. When we are reaching out to them, how are we approaching them? Are we doing it in a way that we are owning up to a mistake, or, are we doing this the way that, I guess that's my personal opinion, is that we should be owning up to this mistake? That's my first question.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And this summer, we created a script where, so that when teams contacted, they kind of have some talking points, which all revolved around the citations and the fact that as a district, we were cited for noncompliance. And as a result, we needed to reconvene the IEP meeting to determine if we needed to provide compensatory ed to their student. And I will follow up, but I'm pretty sure we gave that same guidance to teams, but that's something I can follow up on.
Okay, and then my other question was, sort of sprinkled throughout the citations were comments about people not being properly trained on functional behavioral assessments, or people at an IEP meeting maybe not having read the IEP beforehand, or sort of some confusion about how this type of instruction is supposed to be delivered versus that type. What have we done as far as training for the IEP team members and the people who are delivering the special education, so that when we reconvene all these meetings or we do this compensatory education, we're making sure that we do it properly?
That's a good question. So we scheduled throughout this year various PD or professional development days, and we have done it, and this gets confusing, so I hope I don't make it too confusing. We broke our 300 teachers up into 7 what we call cohorts, or 7 groups, and then we take each group for a day and provide professional development, and each group is getting 8 days of professional development. We had to submit the plan to the Department of Ed because the professional development had to address all of the citations and the concerns within there. So the area with the functional behavioral assessment, according to the state, that in order to be qualified to conduct a functional behavioral assessment, the staff would need to go through the AEA's Challenging Behavior Team training, which is, I believe, a 5-day training. This year, and all of the AEA staff assigned to Davenport have had that training. So they're able to conduct the functional behavioral assessments, and they can then coach and work with our teams on developing appropriate behavior intervention plans if one wasn't developed. And then they are also, we're currently, the day that we're providing right now is 2 people from the Challenging Behavior Team training our teachers, or giving them basically the introduction to functional behavioral assessments, behavior intervention plans, and the data we need to look at and how we need to approach behavior. And then in the future, we couldn't fit it in this year because of all of the other professional development and training that we're providing, but in the future, then we will look at having teams within the district or within each building go through that 5-day training, so that we feel like we have we don't have to rely only on the AEA because there's not that many of them, and we need to have more people in our district trained. We do. Did that
Okay, and
answer
then
your
that goes
question?
for It did part of it. But,
Okay.
So for sort of the standard IEP meeting, maybe not a functional behavioral assessment,
Okay.
but there were some hints that maybe not everybody kind of was up to speed. They didn't always read the IEP beforehand, or, you know, they may not have known exactly what a certain type of, say, instruction, how it was supposed to be delivered or something like that. Are we sort of brushing everybody up on
Yeah.
the basics?
Yes, we are. We are going through the different parts of the IEP. One of the areas that we've already touched on, and we'll touch on again, was prior written notices, because we were obviously cited for inadequate prior written notices. And then we are taking them through, we're doing it through the lens, though, of individualization, because part of the issue was that we were not good about developing individualized IEPs. And so we're working with our teachers on how to do that. And yes, to go over all of those pieces. But I
Okay,
think it'll take more
good.
than just
Thank
this
you.
year.
Yeah, I can see how that might be. And then all of this, you said all of the citations, all the professional development was addressing all of the citations. So along with doing this sort of, all this special ed retraining, they are also doing the training in implicit bias and things like that to help correct some of the disproportionality. Is that correct?
Yes, they're participating in, so the district was already addressing that because they saw that it was a problem
Right.
over the previous couple of years, and our special ed teachers are participating in all of the cultural proficiency training that's going on right now.
Okay, thanks.
Director Mayfield, do you have anything?
No, I'm just listening. Do you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Any other discussion?
I'm listening.
The one other area, I mean, this area of disproportionality is, from my perspective, a huge conundrum, and especially as it was presented by the board at that meeting. And when they talked about decades of issues, before and after, it sounds like a 100-year issue when I think of it. And that's probably more years than I'll even live. And so I understand that the district is doing certain things. But what I got from that meeting was that it was the board's responsibility also on a lot of this, and that especially in this area of disproportionality. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that the board specifically has the responsibility of making decisions with respect to expulsions and with respect to some suspensions. And that was some of the data that was presented originally as suggesting an institutional bias and causing, I guess, I don't know if that's the right word, but this disproportionality. And so as I think about it, and then, I mean, they mixed in a lot of words. They mixed in community. I don't remember if they mixed in city. I think they did state. And so I'm doing a lot of research on that, but I'm wondering if you have ideas with respect to, you talk about training for the staff and training for this and that, but is there something the board needs to do with respect to training that will specifically address those issues of the systemic issues relative to disproportionality?
Susan, do you care if I jump in here on this one? In listening to a couple notes I wrote down, I do think we need to provide the board with the PD schedule that we currently have. I think that would be great information for you to have, the cohorts, the sessions they're going through. You should have that meeting so that if even as a board member, you wanted to attend one of those sessions to see what was being covered. We're also covering information with all of our administrators in the district. The AA is helping with that through our Leadership Academy, providing you that information. I was listening for some of the data you were asking about. You know, the board request for what you actually were wanting to see would help us, would guide us in making sure, because instead of answering your questions, we could definitely get that information to you in our weekly meetings, put that together so we have exactly what you're looking for, and you get it on Friday. And then if you had follow-up questions, we could have that for you. But I do think it's a multi-year, but when we say that, we're not saying that like we want this to take multiple years. It's just the amount of time that we can get to every one of those teachers. And so we're getting to our special ed teachers. We're using the administrators to get the information back to the gen ed teachers in the buildings, and that process of this year taking place. But we definitely can provide some of our feedback to you that we're already doing for professional development. I think that would bring you more in tune, because you're going to get questions in the community, and that would help you answer those questions of where we're at in the steps. I don't know if that answers all of your question, but.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion?
I actually have a follow-up to that. If there were a list somewhere, just like a one-place list, maybe you could provide it to Mary and she could provide it to us, of all the things that are going on so that we can drop in when we have the availability, that would be great.
Yep, we can do that.
All right. Thank you all very much. Oh.
If I may interject something here. You know, we've had great programs that have been successful. Are we reluctant to look at them to see if any of them were sustained over a period of time? And if they were, why we dropped them? Now, I know that's a big chore to do, so we're talking about many years. But, you know, of course, we can contribute to any successful program that the parents did. Well, I know I didn't do it with my kids and did it with my wife because there's so much we didn't know, and we had to depend on the school system to do it. Even though we did the guiding, we did the enforcement, but we did not teach them all that they know. What about those kids that have been successful? What about those kids of color that have reached to the top? Why aren't we looking at the top kids and trying to duplicate that? And I think we have in a couple of programs, but our emphasis has been so much, and you got to have a beginning to get to the end. But we're ignoring the fact that many of these kids are underperforming when it comes to the top level courses. You know, I can give you an instance of one of my kids that was sitting in an AP course, and I asked how many other black kids was in there. And you know what he said? None. Now, that in itself, there has to be a reason why. And it does not start when they get to 10th grade. It doesn't start when they get to 12th grade. It starts when they're in that kindergarten, when they come into the school. And if we know by the time they're in 3rd grade that they're falling behind, we say we can't afford to have summer school, catch kids up. But look where we're falling. Can we afford to keep going where we're at? Can we afford, but we sort of looked at as our worst case scenarios as being our best. And you know that's not true. We've got great students here, we've got great programs, but we have produced many kids that are not obtaining, and this just happens to be one more incident when it comes to kids of color, disproportionately, that they are not performing. I don't think it's just up to the schools. If you cannot get the parents involved, if you cannot get the city involved, if you cannot get them involved, then you're beating a dead horse. You cannot just sit back and think it's going to happen because you're wishing it will. It has to be something that the whole city is behind. It has to be something that the families are behind. It has to be something that not just the school system says they want, because keep in mind, they're only in school for 6 hours, maybe 7. Where do they spend the rest of their time and where they're doing it? It's the community. We got to look at the community to help. And until we can get everybody to jump on board, we're just fighting an uphill battle. Whatever we do is going to be negated somewhat by what they do after they get out of school at 3 o'clock. So I hope there is a big deal made of, and I know there's community meetings. I have not attended those community meetings because we keep going over the same thing for the last 20 years. There has to be a different way of doing it. So I hope that this is a new beginning as always. Have a little hope, you know, but you just got to keep in mind how many times I've started this process and it still has not done it yet. Not that I give up, but I keep saying the very same things. Hopefully, there's somebody out there hear me at all. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Director Gosa.
I just wanted to say thank you guys for the special ed updates as frequent as you've been giving them. You kind of beat me to the punch when I made my board request for it. So I do appreciate it. I'm glad that we're righting the wrongs that happened, and hopefully we can get the services provided to all the kids that lost out on them. Thank you again.
Okay, we'll wrap up that conversation. Thank you very much, all of you. We'll move on to administrative reports.
There's none at this time.
Okay, board requests. I do have at least a couple. Looks like I have 3. First is from Director DeSalvo, today's date. Information request, certified enrollment by school for the years of 2016, 2017, and 2018. Why are you requesting this information or agenda item? To study enrollment trends. Is there a second?
Second.
When would you like this information ASAP? Director Gosa, today's date, requests an agenda item to have a discussion on the board's responsibility in hiring and firing of employees. Why are you requesting this information or agenda item? I feel this is a discussion that needs to be had in light of the recent meeting with the state board stating that the board needs to have a more active role in the process. Is there a second?
Second.
You got it. Thank you. When would you like this agenda item ASAP? Director Gosa, today's date, requested an agenda item to form a property committee for real estate. Why are you requesting this information or agenda item? It would be good to have a committee when the sale or purchase of properties come up. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. And there's no indication of when, so that will just be as soon as, as soon as possible, I guess. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.
Aye.
Thank you.